Good evening. Welcome to Unwind University, where our intention is always to provide a quiet corner, a gentle mental space where the everyday clamor can slowly fade into the background. We invite you to settle in comfortably, finding a soft place, and simply allow your thoughts to begin their gentle process of release. There is no rush here, only a peaceful drifting into moments long past. This evening, our quiet exploration will take us into the enduring legacies of human ingenuity, presented with a tranquil slowness designed to soothe the mind as the day draws to its close. Our journey tonight will softly lead us through the whispers of ancient designs, focusing on structures that have stood for many centuries. We will not rush through their silent stories, but rather we will observe them with the same patience one might offer to a slowly drifting cloud, without effort, simply taking in their quiet, steadfast presence. These are not tales of high drama, but rather an appreciation for the steady hands and thoughtful minds that shaped the physical world long ago. Imagine the subtle contours, the quiet patterns etched into ancient stone and patient earth. As we contemplate these age-old constructions, allow your own mind to softly wander, finding a peaceful rhythm in the quiet contemplation of history. There is a deeply calming simplicity in tracing the imagined lines of a wall built thousands of years ago, picturing the quiet dedication of those who carefully laid each brick. It is a slow, steady immersion into a distant time, a gentle retreat far removed from the immediate concerns of the present. This journey is crafted to be a quiet companion as your thoughts begin their natural transition towards a restful slumber. The aim of Unwind University is always to offer a gentle lull, a serene pathway to peace, found within the quiet corners of our shared human story. With each passing detail we observe, each slow reflection on the ancient designs we will gently encounter, feel your awareness softly softening, becoming lighter, more yielding. Let the steady rhythm of our quiet narrative be like a calm evening breeze, gradually easing you into a deeper state of relaxation. Our shared observation of these remarkable structures built so long ago is simply a quiet prelude to a truly peaceful night. The earliest efforts to safeguard a home, a family, or a community were often remarkably humble, a far cry from the towering, grand stone walls that might first come to mind. Long before skilled masons meticulously placed heavy stones, people simply sought basic reassurance. Imagine, if you will, the very first stirrings of defensive architecture, not as mighty fortresses, but as something far more elemental and immediate. These initial attempts at protection were rooted in the resources at hand, often just the wood from the surrounding forests, shaped and erected with simple tools and collective effort. It was a practical response to a quiet, persistent need for safety in a world that could sometimes feel quite uncertain. Consider the small wooden palisades that once encircled early settlements. These were not elaborate structures built for long sieges, but rather upright logs, perhaps sharpened at the top, driven firmly into the earth side by side. They formed a simple encircling fence, a barrier intended to deter casual threats, to offer a measure of separation between the inside and the outside. A palisade might have been just tall enough to make climbing difficult. A visual declaration that this space was occupied, that this community sought to protect its inhabitants and its stores. It offered a basic sense of security, a visible perimeter that defined the limits of a home, a village, or a small encampment, providing a gentle comfort against the unknown shadows beyond the edge of the clearing. These wooden walls, while modest, were a significant step. They represented a collective decision, a communal act of building for shared protection. Over time, as communities grew and the threats they faced became more sophisticated, the need for more substantial defenses slowly became apparent. A simple fence, while effective for its immediate purpose, could not withstand a determined assault. Slowly, the ideas began to emerge for something a little more robust, something that could offer a greater vantage point, a stronger barrier, perhaps even incorporating the very earth beneath their feet into its design. This quiet evolution in defensive thinking would gently lead to new forms of construction, preparing the way for structures that were still earthy and straightforward, yet offered a significant leap forward in medieval fortification. We will soon observe the quiet rise of a particularly ingenious and enduring form of early castle, often built with these very principles in mind, a structure known by the humble name of the Motte and Bailey. Following these early thoughts on defensive positions, the Motte and Bailey, a remarkably effective early form of castle, began to spread across the landscape. Our story softly starts with this design, an enduring shape that brought a modest sense of security to many. It was not a grand fortress of polished stone, but rather a practical answer to immediate needs, often built with the very earth and timber at hand, rising quietly from the fields and hills. At the heart of this design was the motte, a raised mound of earth, carefully piled up by many hands. Upon this elevated position, a wooden tower, often quite simple in its construction, would stand, providing a clear vantage point and a last refuge should the outer defenses be breached. The height of this mound offered a natural advantage, making it difficult for attackers to approach the tower unseen or to scale its walls easily. It was a humble yet effective way to gain elevation, a gentle defiance against the flat ground. Surrounding the base of the motte, often in an irregular shape that conformed to the contours of the land, lay the bailey. This was a lower, enclosed courtyard, a space of everyday life and preparation. Within its protective wooden palisades, one might find a hall for living, stables for horses, perhaps workshops, and certainly space for the local population to gather in times of danger. It was the bustling heart of the settlement, shielded by the defensive works, a place where people could continue their quiet routines under a watchful eye. The entire structure, from the earthen motte to the wooden palisades of the bailey, could often be constructed with surprising speed, using local materials and the labor of many. This made the Motte and Bailey an ideal choice for quickly establishing control over new territories, or for providing immediate defense in unsettled times. Its very simplicity was its strength, allowing for widespread adoption across medieval Europe, a testament to its practical genius. Yet wood, for all its convenience, held its own gentle limitations, and the whisper of something more enduring, something carved from the very earth it stood upon, would soon begin to echo through the landscape, quietly inviting a new kind of strength into being. The whisper of something more enduring eventually grew into a steady, persistent call. For all its practical genius and quick utility, wood, even in its most robust forms, carried an inherent, quiet fragility against the relentless march of time and the more aggressive elements of fire and decay. A different kind of strength was desired, one that resonated with the very earth it guarded. Thus, as the years folded into centuries, the ingenuity of early builders, ever seeking to refine and solidify their designs, turned its gaze from the living forest to the patient, silent quarry. The transition was not swift, nor was it always easy, requiring immense labor and a deeper understanding of materials. But the reward was a profound shift in the very nature of defense. It was a gradual, deliberate evolution, moving from the adaptable impermanence of timber to the reassuring, unyielding solidity of rock. With this shift, the central stronghold, the heart of what would grow to be a castle, began to transform into something truly monumental. The Motte and Bailey, with its wooden tower, slowly gave way to the grander, more imposing presence of the stone keep. These were not mere fortifications built in haste. They were carefully planned, painstakingly constructed edifices, often rising several stories high. Their walls, sometimes many feet thick, were a testament to human endeavor and a profound understanding of defensive architecture. Each carefully cut stone block, painstakingly hoisted into place, contributed to an edifice designed to stand not for years, but for generations, silently witnessing the passage of countless seasons and the comings and goings of many lives. Within these sturdy stone keeps, life found a new, more permanent rhythm. No longer a temporary refuge, the keep became a veritable stronghold, a final bastion of defense, where the lord and his household could retreat during times of siege. Its thick, unyielding walls offered not only protection from external threats, but also a sense of security and permanence that the lighter wooden structures simply could not provide. These central keeps were more than just military structures. They housed great halls for feasting and governance, private chambers for rest, and storerooms for provisions, forming the enduring, beating heart of the entire castle complex. They stood as silent, unwavering sentinels, anchors in an often turbulent world. The very mass and weight of these stone structures spoke volumes of their purpose: to endure. They rooted themselves deeply into the landscape, becoming an intrinsic part of the horizon, symbols of stability and established power. The cool, quiet air within their depths, the gentle hush that permeated their substantial rooms, provided a sense of sanctuary, a comforting embrace against the clamor of the outside world. To step inside one of these ancient keeps was to feel the weight of history, but also the profound, simple comfort of enduring shelter. These magnificent, sturdy stone keeps, with their silent, watchful presence, were designed to offer a timeless protection, a lasting peace, a true home against the shifting sands of time, gently wrapping those within in their steadfast, protective arms. The solid, reassuring presence of the central keep offered a profound sense of security, its thick stone walls a silent promise of refuge. Yet, even such a formidable structure, standing tall and watchful, eventually suggested the wisdom of further, broader layers of defense. It was a natural progression, a quiet understanding that a single, strong heart might benefit from a wider, encompassing embrace. Gradually, thoughtfully, the defenses began to expand outwards, like ripples in a calm pond, each circle adding another measure of peace to the protected space within. These expansions were not sudden or dramatic, but rather slow, deliberate acts of construction, reflecting a growing appreciation for a more layered kind of safety, extending the keep's protective aura across a larger area. Soon enough, the landscape around many of these keeps saw the rise of what would come to be known as curtain walls. These were not always the towering structures of the main keep itself, but rather long, continuous stretches of stone, often quite high, that began to encircle the central stronghold. They formed the first truly comprehensive barriers, wrapping around the entire complex like a patient stone ribbon. These quiet stretches of masonry, while perhaps less ornate than the keep, offered an immense new dimension of defense. They created an extensive outer perimeter, a deliberate boundary between the internal order and the external uncertainties. Their collective length and steady presence provided a widespread shield, defining a much larger, secure territory than the keep alone could ever encompass. Within their quiet confines, a new calm settled, a greater distance between the immediate safety of the keep and the unpredictable world beyond, allowing for a broader, more sheltered haven where daily life could unfold. These outer layers of stone were designed to absorb the initial shocks, to create a buffer zone, a patient waiting area for any outside disturbance. They stood as vigilant sentinels, quiet and unwavering, extending the perimeter of protection considerably. Imagine the feeling of stepping within these concentric circles of stone, moving from the open land into the embrace of the first, then the second, and finally the inner sanctum of the keep. Each wall was a gentle whisper of security, a subtle reminder that one was moving deeper into a place of enduring peace. With these extensive new barriers, the question of access, of how one might safely enter or leave this newly defined, expansive secure zone, became an essential consideration. The need for carefully managed points of entry and exit, woven purposefully into these long, silent stretches of stone, would soon bring about their own unique and thoughtful architectural solutions. The careful management of entry and exit points, as they became integrated into those long, silent stretches of stone, naturally led to a particular focus on the main gateway. This opening, though essential for all movement, was also inherently a potential weak point, a place where a breach might most easily occur. In its earliest forms, a simple gap in the wall, perhaps with a basic wooden door, served this purpose. But as the understanding of defense grew, this vulnerable spot began its thoughtful transformation, evolving from a mere opening into something far more intricate and robust. This was the birth of the gatehouse, a structure designed to welcome some, yet deter others, with a quiet, persistent strength. The development of the gatehouse was a gradual architectural evolution, driven by the desire for enhanced security, without sacrificing the practical need for passage. Instead of a single, easily forced barrier, the approach involved layers upon layers of defensive elements. One would encounter not just a solitary door, but often several, each crafted from thick, sturdy timbers, reinforced with iron, and designed to withstand considerable force. These doors would be positioned in sequence, separated by short and closed passages, ensuring that even if one was overcome, another immediately stood ready, presenting a fresh, quiet challenge to any unwelcome visitor. Further enhancing these layered defenses were the portcullises. These heavy, grilled gates, typically made of wood and iron, would descend slowly and deliberately from above, sealing off the passage with their imposing weight. A gatehouse might incorporate 2 or even 3 such portcullises, each capable of being lowered independently, creating a truly formidable series of obstacles. The combination of solid doors and heavy portcullises meant that gaining entry was not a swift or simple act. It was a process designed to be prolonged, demanding patience and considerable effort, all while those within remained safely observant. Beyond the physical barriers, the very layout of the gatehouse approach was carefully considered. Entry was rarely a direct, straight path. Instead, the route might be made to wind, to turn sharply, or even to force an approaching party to expose their vulnerable right flank, for those who carried shields in their left hand. This winding approach inherently slowed movement, making a headlong rush impossible. It transformed what could have been a swift assault into a deliberate, unhurried progression, where every step was observed, every intention measured, ensuring that entry became a thoughtful, controlled experience, often under the watchful gaze of unseen eyes. Thus, the gatehouse became a miniature fortress in itself, a sophisticated mechanism of controlled access, where time and layered defenses were its most subtle yet powerful allies. It was a profound statement of purpose, designed to transform a potential weakness into a place of quiet, enduring strength, a testament to the meticulous planning involved in safeguarding a protected space. Yet, even beyond the impressive solidity of these gatehouses, there existed a multitude of smaller, less obvious, but equally vital elements, quietly integrated into the design, working tirelessly to support the overall security of these well-ordered realms. It was a profound statement of purpose, designed to transform a potential weakness into a place of quiet, enduring strength, a testament to the meticulous planning involved in safeguarding a protected space. Yet, even beyond the impressive solidity of these gatehouses, there existed a multitude of smaller, less obvious, but equally vital elements, quietly integrated into the design, working tirelessly to support the overall security of these well-ordered realms. Beyond the quiet strength of the gatehouses, a closer look at the castle walls reveals a further array of inconspicuous features. These were not grand statements, but practical adjustments, patiently incorporated into the stone. Their purpose was singular: to provide defenders with quiet advantages, and to create continuous frustration for any who might approach. This philosophy of incremental deterrence meant every detail contributed to a larger, unyielding barrier, a subtle manipulation of space. Among these understated details were tiny arrow slits, narrow vertical apertures cut into the thick stone. From outside, they presented an almost insignificant target, a mere dark line. Yet from within, these slits offered archers a restricted view, allowing them to patiently observe and release arrows. The design ensured archers remained protected by the stone, creating a quiet balance where minimal exposure translated into a constant, subtle threat for approaching forces. Further enhancing protection were machicolations, small, floorless openings projecting outward from upper walls and towers. Often above doorways or battlements, these allowed defenders to drop various items directly down onto an unsuspecting area below without exposure. Imagine the quiet descent of heavy stones or other substances gently released into the space at the wall's base. It was a clever solution, providing an additional layer of defense for critical areas beneath the defender's feet. These quiet details, narrow arrow slits, and thoughtful machicolations were never isolated elements. They formed a cohesive defensive strategy designed to work in concert, creating continuous, gentle pressure on any adversary. They represented a deep understanding of a besieged structure's strengths and vulnerabilities. The intent was not to create dramatic moments, but to establish persistent discomfort for attackers, slowly eroding their resolve, making every step of their approach more difficult. Such meticulous attention to these quiet, protective details underscores a fundamental principle of castle design. That security was built through a series of interlocking, carefully considered elements. These subtle protections, woven into the very fabric of the castle's exterior, were just one part of a much larger, more intricate tapestry of defense. They were outer safeguards, guiding an understanding of how an entire fortress operated as a coherent, multifaceted entity, slowly revealing itself as a deeply thoughtful and well-ordered series of protections, layer upon careful layer, all working together to form the truly formidable layered castle. Picking up from the truly formidable layered castle, the concept of layers truly came to life in designs where one massive wall was nestled carefully within another. This was not merely a single imposing barrier, but a series of thoughtful, overlapping circles or sometimes irregular shapes. Each layer presented its own distinct, quiet challenge, a new set of considerations for any group approaching with the intent to breach its stillness. Imagine walking towards such a place. First, you would encounter the outer curtain wall, often robust and tall, perhaps studded with towers. If, through considerable effort, one managed to pass beyond this initial boundary, they would not find themselves truly inside the heart of the castle. Instead, they would step into an open area, known as the outer ward, where another, often even stronger wall waited silently. This inner wall, often taller and more densely defended, enclosed the most vital structures, the keep itself and the primary living quarters. This quiet arrangement meant that the process of taking such a castle was not a single endeavor, but rather a sequence of distinct, demanding tasks. Every wall had to be addressed independently. Each gatehouse, each defensive tower, had to be carefully considered anew, even after the previous layer had been bypassed. The space between the walls, the wards themselves, served as areas where defenders on the inner wall could rain down projectiles upon any force trapped within the outer perimeter. It was a slow, deliberate method of wearing down an attacker's patience and resources. The very presence of these multiple layers created a persistent sense of never quite arriving, of always facing another barrier, another calculated delay. This architectural design was a testament to a deep understanding of prolonged defense, aimed at exhausting an attacking force both physically and mentally, long before they could reach the central strongholds. It was a structure built for endurance, for quiet resistance, drawing out any confrontation into days, weeks, or even months of methodical effort. The stone itself seemed to breathe a patient, unwavering defiance. Yet not all defenses were made of stone, nor were they always vertical walls. Sometimes the most effective protections were those that seemed to do nothing at all, merely lying still, observing, creating a boundary that was perhaps more subtle but no less formidable. Such quiet, unmoving features often complemented the towering walls, adding another dimension to the castle's patient defense. These elements could be natural or carefully crafted, surrounding the solid fortifications with a gentle yet persistent boundary. One such silent guardian, often a very important one, was water, providing its own brand of calm, protective embrace around the castle's foundations. One such silent guardian, often a very important one, was water, providing its own brand of calm, protective embrace around the castle's foundations. Indeed, sometimes a calm moat, carefully dug and filled, or a quiet, nearby river flowing gently along offered a natural and deeply tranquil barrier. The presence of water, in its stillness or its soft, constant movement, introduced an additional layer of peace to the castle's extensive defenses. Imagine the moat, a dark, still ribbon encircling the stone walls. Its surface, often smooth and reflective like a vast flat mirror, would silently absorb the shifting light of day or the deep shadows of night. This quiet pool, seemingly passive, was a significant deterrent. Crossing such a body of water presented immediate and difficult challenges to any who approached with hostile intent. It complicated the movement of heavy siege engines, making it nearly impossible to bring them close to the walls without extensive, time-consuming preparation. It made scaling the walls from the base of the foundation far more perilous, as the water itself would need to be navigated first, perhaps under a hail of arrows or stones from above. The water could be deep, cold, and often muddy, serving as a silent, ever-present obstacle that needed to be overcome before the true assault on the walls could even begin. A slow-moving river, following its ancient course, performed a similar function, sometimes even more effectively. Its current, however gentle, added another dimension of difficulty, making bridging or fording a complex undertaking, especially when under observation from the watchful eyes of the castle's defenders. These aquatic boundaries, whether dug by human hands or shaped by nature's patient will, created a clear, undeniable line of demarcation, setting the castle apart from the outside world. The still water, or the river's steady flow, thus added an extra layer of peace, both practical and psychological, to the castle's overall security. It was a serene yet steadfast component of the defensive strategy, completing the ring of protection around the castle's solid heart. With the external barriers now considered, the towering walls, the vigilant gatehouses, and the quiet, encircling waters, our thoughts can slowly turn inward, away from these outward defenses and towards the very reason they were built and maintained. We may now, in our minds, step beyond these protective measures and gently consider the daily existence within the castle's guarded embrace, exploring the routines and realities of the lives carried on inside the walls. Stepping, then, beyond the formidable defenses, beyond the drawbridge and the portcullis, we find ourselves now within the castle's inner world. It is here that the true purpose of all that stone and timber becomes clear, for these were not merely strongholds of conflict, but also, fundamentally, homes. Imagine the great walls not just as barriers, but as quiet envelopes, enclosing a world where daily existence unfolded in its own steady rhythm. There were courtyards, perhaps with a well at their center, where daylight fell differently than outside, softened by the high stone edges, and where the air carried the faint sense of cooking fires and damp earth, a quiet sort of domesticity residing even in such a grand and imposing structure, a peaceful core at the heart of the stone. Within these robust enclosures, life carried on in ways that might surprise us, far from the constant clang of swords or the blare of trumpets. There were kitchens, always busy with the preparation of simple meals, and workshops where skilled hands shaped wood or mended metal, each sound a soft echo in the enclosed space. Children might have played quiet games in the sun-dappled yards, their voices hushed by the towering architecture, while servants went about their tasks, moving with the quiet efficiency of long practice. Even the animals, Perhaps a few chickens pecking in a corner or a dog dozing in a patch of warmth contributed to this gentle hum of ordinary living, a continuous, unobtrusive presence within the castle's embrace. As evening approached, the sounds would soften further. The hearths in the great hall and in the more private chambers would glow with a comforting warmth, casting long, dancing shadows upon the stone walls. Within the sleeping chambers, often simply furnished, people would prepare for their rest, the day's quiet duties slowly fading into the stillness of the night. These rooms, though sometimes drafty, offered a measure of security and privacy, a place for contemplation or for undisturbed slumber after the day's gentle exertions. The thick walls, which kept out enemies, also held in the quiet warmth of human presence, a serene stillness settling over the castle as darkness fell, broken only by the soft creaks of timber or the distant call of an owl. This rhythm of daily life, steady and predictable, was the normal state of affairs, the ongoing pattern that defined existence inside the castle. It was a life largely lived in anticipation of nothing dramatic, a quiet continuity from one day to the next, year after year. Yet this very routine, this comfortable familiarity, often masked a deeper readiness, a quiet understanding that the castle's primary purpose could, at any moment, be called upon. The tranquility, the security of these walls was ultimately a temporary gift, dependent on the absence of external pressure. Sometimes, however, this quiet routine was interrupted, and the formidable defenses, along with the resilience of those within, would be tested by a very specific and often prolonged challenge, a slow and deliberate trial of patience that could stretch for weeks or even months at the castle's very gates. Indeed, that prolonged challenge often manifested as a siege, a test less of sudden, overwhelming force and more of sheer, unyielding endurance. When the banners of an attacking army appeared on the horizon, the great gates would clang shut, the drawbridge would rise, and the castle, designed for exactly such moments, would settle into a posture of patient defiance. Within its walls, defenders would ready their provisions, inspect their defenses, and prepare for a long period of quiet vigilance. Outside, the attackers would establish their camps, sometimes building their own counter-fortifications, and then the great waiting would begin. Days and nights simply unfolded, one after another, marked not by dramatic assaults, but by the steady, unhurried rhythm of waiting. Time itself seemed to slow to a crawl around the besieged fortress. From the battlements, guards would watch the distant enemy campfires flicker out at dawn and then ignite again at dusk. Inside, the sound of the wind was often the loudest noise, whistling through arrow slits and along cold stone corridors. The daily routines of both sides became an exercise in conserving resources and maintaining morale, a subtle dance of wills played out over weeks and sometimes months, as seasons gently shifted around the unmoving walls. The quiet passing of time was the siege's most potent weapon, for both those within and those without. For the defenders, it was a conflict against dwindling food and water, against the slow spread of illness, and against the insidious erosion of hope, as they constantly scanned the horizon for a promised relief army that might never arrive. For the attackers, it was a struggle against the weather, against disease in their own ranks, against the cost of maintaining an army in the field, and against the risk of their own supply lines being cut. The occasional skirmish, a probing attack on a gate, or the distant thud of a trebuchet launching a stone, merely punctuated the vast, silent stretches of watchful inactivity, emphasizing the profound stillness that characterized these prolonged trials. These moments of extended stillness, where the castle's very purpose was distilled to an essence of quiet resilience, truly defined its enduring strength. It was in these long stretches that the true character of stone and spirit was revealed, demonstrating the immense patience required to outlast an adversary. Yet, even as these formidable structures stood firm through such exhaustive tests, their time as the undisputed centers of power and protection would not last forever. Eventually, a different kind of quiet would settle upon them, a deep, lasting peace as the world around them began to change, and the necessity for such vigilant endurance slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to diminish. This gradual shift, almost a whisper in the long history of stone and mortar, marked a pivotal turn. For centuries, the very idea of security and power was linked to the towering strength of a castle. Its walls promised safety, its keep dominion. But as history's pages turned, slowly, quietly, a new element appeared, an innovation that would, over time, gently erode the foundations of this ancient architectural might. It arrived not with a sudden cataclysm, but with muffled thuds and plumes of smoke, gunpowder. This strange substance, when harnessed, launched projectiles with unprecedented force. Initially crude, these early cannons and firearms presented a challenge that static castle defenses were not designed to meet. Mighty stone walls, which had resisted countless sieges, now showed vulnerabilities to this different kind of impact. No longer could a lord stack stones ever higher or thicken a wall indefinitely to counter these emerging threats. The economics and engineering of defense shifted. Building new castles in the old style became impractical and expensive, offering less return on investment for true security. Existing structures, while still formidable, gradually lost their absolute strategic supremacy. They became less about impregnable defense and more a deterrent, or simply a grand home. The age of the massive, purpose-built fortress as the ultimate military power symbol began its long, graceful retreat. Instead of new castles rising on every strategic hill, existing ones began to adapt, or gently settle into a quieter existence. Some were modified with lower, thicker walls, designed to deflect rather than absorb impacts, while others slowly transformed into more comfortable, less overtly military residences. Their purpose, once sharp and unyielding, softened around the edges. And so, the era when the castle stood as undisputed master of the battlefield drew to a gentle close. Their grand silhouettes remained etched against the sky, but their role as primary defensive bulwark faded. Yet, even in this softening, this quiet yielding to new technologies, the castles did not simply vanish. They transitioned, becoming silent witnesses to history, holding within their ancient stones the memory of past glories, a deep resonance of power, and tales of resilience that would, much later, emerge as subtle echoes, as quiet whispers of a grandeur that once was. The castles, in their enduring presence, did not simply become forgotten ruins. They transformed into something more akin to silent monuments.
Their stone walls, though no longer active battlements, continued to hold a profound weight. Each weathered block, each moss-covered archway, seemed to absorb the passage of time, preserving within its very structure the essence of a bygone era. They stood, and still stand, as physical reminders of a world long past, their immense forms asserting a quiet dignity against the modern sky, a testament to the hands that built them and the lives that unfolded within their shadows. These structures, often imposing even in decay, are not truly silent. While they no longer ring with the clamor of conflict or the daily routines of court, they hold an intricate tapestry of soundless narratives. One might almost perceive, in the deepest quiet of an ancient hall, the faint echo of footsteps, the rustle of long-vanished garments, or the murmur of long-forgotten conversations. It is not an audible sound, of course, but a subtle impression, a feeling that washes over visitors, hinting at the myriad lives lived out within these stone confines. They bore witness to celebrations and sieges, to births and deaths, to grand pronouncements and quiet intrigues, all now folded into the very fabric of their existence. This lasting impression is profound. Castles, even today, captivate the imagination, serving as powerful symbols of strength, romance, and an often romanticized past. They stir a sense of wonder, inviting us to contemplate the vast sweep of history and our own small place within it. Their stories, though no longer actively spoken, continue to resonate, carried forward not by loud declarations, but by the quiet passage of time itself. These echoes are gentle, almost imperceptible, a soft whisper carried on the wind that rustles through empty courtyards, a lingering atmosphere in the chill of a dungeon, or the serene view from a conflict-scarred parapet. They are the stories of power, protection, and permanence, softly woven into the tapestry of our collective memory. And yet, the tale of the castle does not conclude solely within its formidable walls. Its influence, though concentrated, often rippled outwards, shaping the very landscape and communities that grew up around it. The castle was an anchor, a center around which villages clustered. Trade routes converged, and societies organized themselves. Its presence defined boundaries, fostered local economies, and provided a focal point for the lives of countless individuals who, though perhaps never entering its highest towers, were profoundly shaped by its existence. The castle was not merely a standalone edifice. It was an integral part of a much larger network, its deep roots extending far beyond its immediate stone foundations into the very heart of the lands and lives it dominated, hinting at the enduring story that continued to unfold in the wider world around it. This broader narrative, extending beyond the protective embrace of the stone, reveals a fascinating progression, an intricate dance between architecture, people, and the evolving world. This broader narrative, extending beyond the protective embrace of the stone, reveals a fascinating progression, an intricate dance between architecture, people, and the evolving world. And so, our gaze extends now past the fortified towers and stout curtain walls to explore the wider landscape of medieval existence. The ingenuity of the age, you see, was not solely confined to these great defensive strongholds. Indeed, the very essence of medieval life unfolded across a much broader architectural stage, a collection of structures, each with its own quiet purpose, its own silent story to tell. They formed the very fabric of society, from the grandest aspirations to the most modest daily needs, all contributing to the enduring tableau of that distant time, far removed from the clamor and concerns of today. These buildings, standing as silent witnesses, whisper of an intricate world, patiently awaiting our gentle contemplation. Think for a moment of the soaring cathedrals. These were not built in haste, but over generations, their construction spanning lifetimes, a testament to unwavering faith and collective endeavor. Their massive stone forms rose from the earth, reaching towards the heavens, intricate with carvings and vast stained glass windows that filtered the light into a hushed, reverent glow. They served as spiritual anchors, places of worship and reflection, certainly, but also as community hubs, centers for learning, and quiet places of refuge. Their very scale spoke of aspiration, of a deep human desire to create something lasting, something beautiful for the ages. Each carefully placed stone, each meticulously carved detail played its part in these magnificent, silent narratives. Then there were the bustling market halls, often timber-framed, their open spaces echoing with the low murmur of commerce and conversation. These were the economic heartbeats of many towns, places where goods were exchanged, news was shared, and the rhythms of daily life unfolded in a practical, unadorned manner. And beneath the shadow of both castle and cathedral, countless humble homes dotted the landscape. Small, often built of wattle and daub, with thatched roofs, these were the dwellings of the common folk. Simple shelters providing warmth and safety after a long day's toil. They were the settings for family life, for quiet meals, for the routines that sustained generations, forming the quiet base upon which all else was built. Each of these structures, be it the imposing castle, the aspiring cathedral, the practical market hall, or the modest home, contributed its own unique thread to the rich tapestry of the medieval age. They stand as enduring echoes of a time long past, inviting us to consider the quiet lives lived within their walls, the hands that built them, and the stories they held. As we gently draw our attention away from these ancient stones, and as the day slowly gives way to the stillness of night, perhaps these quiet reflections can guide your own thoughts, allowing them to drift softly, calmly towards a peaceful rest.
And so, our quiet journey, a gentle wandering through the medieval world of design, slowly draws to its close. We have paused together among the ancient stones, considering the quiet strength of their foundations, the careful arc of their windows, and the thoughtful placement of each beam. It has been a peaceful passage, tracing the lines and forms that once shaped daily life, from grand cathedral spires reaching towards the heavens, to humble dwellings offering shelter through long, quiet nights. Each structure, whether imposing or modest, carried the silent echoes of countless hands and the patient rhythms of a bygone era, whispering stories of ingenuity and purpose across the centuries. Now, as our minds begin to soften and the edges of the day grow indistinct, allow those intricate patterns and solid forms to recede softly, like shadows lengthening at dusk. Picture, if you will, a single, smooth, cool stone, perhaps one that has rested for 1,000 years in a sun-dappled cloister garden. Feel its stillness, its enduring calm. or imagine the gentle curve of a Romanesque arch, strong and unwavering. Let these images, not as detailed blueprints, but as serene impressions, simply float through your mind, dissolving and reforming, without demand, without urgency. They are merely soft suggestions now, quiet whispers of the past, here only to lull your thoughts into deeper tranquility. The subtle rhythms of those ancient builders, the slow, deliberate pace of their craft, have, for this little while, guided our contemplation. And now these rhythms too can fade, replaced by the soft, steady beat of your own breath, a natural current carrying you towards profound rest. There is no need for further thought, no task unfinished. Simply release the day, release any lingering thoughts, and allow your body to grow heavy, your muscles to relax, softening completely into the quiet embrace of the present. Feel the gentle warmth wherever you are, the soft support beneath you, and let absolute peace settle deep within your very being, from the tips of your toes to the crown of your head. Close your eyes, if they are not already softly closed, and feel the gentle darkness behind your eyelids, a comforting, endless space. Let your mind become like a calm, still pool, reflecting only the quiet peace within. The world outside can wait, for now there is only this profound stillness, this deepening calm. Drift now as effortlessly as a feather upon a soft breeze. Let the final remnants of our journey, the quiet images of ancient stones and clever architecture, gently carry you down, down into a deep, deep and utterly restful sleep. Rest now, gentle listener. Rest deeply and well.